This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission Advisory Review Panel, convened to review the FY22 Arts Organization Support Grant Program applications from AOS Level 3 organizations and regional arts partners. I'm Lisa Abbott, Indianapolis Arts Commission Commissioner from Region 7, Indianapolis. And today is April 26th, 2021. We're meeting online and streaming live for applicants and the public to observe. There is no contact between the panel and the audience about the disposition of applicants, either before, during, or after the panel meeting. This meeting will be recorded and made available upon request. At this time, I will individually invite each of the panelists and then the staff to introduce themselves. Panelists will state their name, occupation, and where they're from in the state, and staff will state their title and role. Let's start with the panel. I'll introduce each of you by your first name so that you can share about yourself. And we'll begin with Kira.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Lisa. Good to be with you. My name is Kira Amstutz. My work is with Indiana Humanities. I'm president and CEO. I hail from Steuben County originally, but I have lived in Indianapolis for the last few decades. So thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Kira. Renee?
Good afternoon. I'm Renee Thomas, and I have the privilege of serving as director of the Purdue University Black Cultural Center, which is located in West Lafayette, Indiana. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Renee. Herb.
Yes, I'm Herb Hernandez, born and raised here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And as my adult life, I've been very active in politics and in a lot of not-for-profit organizations here in the Fort Wayne, Indiana area. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Herb. And Aaron.
I'm Aaron Nichols. I'm from South Bend, Indiana. I'm the executive director of the South Bend Civic Theater. And Lisa, thanks for the privilege. It's an honor to be taking part in this panel.
All right, thank you, panelists. Let's move on to the staff. Staff, please provide your name, title, and role, beginning with Chapin.
Yes, hi, Chapin Schneck. I'm the Contracts Operations and IT Assistant at the Arts Commission, and I'm here as a tech role today.
Thank you, Chapin. And Paige.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm Paige Sharp, and I am the Deputy Director of Programs for the Indiana Arts Commission. And today I will serve as the IAC liaison and provide any clarification or assistance in the panel today.
Thanks very much, Paige. And now we'll begin the panel review.
Lisa,
at this time, I would like to, I'd like to invite Paige to say a few words and then we'll launch right into the panel review. I got a little ahead of myself there. Paige, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I just wanted to provide a little statement before we get started to share a few words on behalf of the Indiana Arts Commission. First and foremost, I want to thank our panelists for sharing your time and experience. You've participated in the specialized training to prepare for this work, which is this year includes how to reduce implicit bias into the review process. And you've spent many hours reviewing these applications, lending your expertise to assure a high quality process. To all here and those listening in, I want to say a few words about why this year's panel process is so different, as longtime panel observers will soon discover. We've been very clear from the beginning of this upcoming grant cycle in our guidelines and application and in the training that our focus would be on what's most important right now, and that is to responsibly support our arts organizations at this critical time. And for this grant cycle, that means supporting organizations that demonstrate they are operating and will continue to operate during the FY22 grant period. As a result of these changes, you may hear very little dialogue and feedback. That in no way reflects a lack of dedication to a thorough evaluation process. It is merely a reflection of this unique time and unique process. Again, thank you for all you do for the arts in Indiana. And soon we will stop sharing that screen, but you can see the list of applications by clicking the description area in the YouTube channel. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Paige. And now we'll begin the panel review. I'll explain a little bit about how this process will work. The panel will first review the application pool for operating support, and then we'll move to merit award consideration. Each one of those has a distinct process. For both processes, if a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed in a digital waiting room while the application is reviewed. Let me first go over the review process for operating support. In this process, panelists will be coming to consensus. They will use a summary sheet that has the results of their individual pre-panel assessments, which were based upon organizational resiliency, like Paige just explained to us. The panel will come to consensus for each application to make one of the following recommendations to the Indiana Arts Commission. Yes, recommend for funding the application as is. No, do not recommend funding the application. Or yes, recommend funding the application with required modifications. The required modifications will be determined by the panel. This means that the Indianapolis Arts Commission and its partners will follow up with the applicants after the panel to collect information to ensure panelists' concerns are addressed. Once a decision has been made for each application, the staff will record the decision. Once the review for operating support is complete, we'll move to the merit process, or if we need one, we'll take a break. For the merit review process, all applicants that elected to submit for merit consideration were assigned a reader. And today, the panel will use the reader process to discuss applications. Because of the competitiveness of the program, these applications whose average score ranked in the top 10 from the pre-assessment will be discussed today. The reader will provide their assessment of the application based upon the evaluation criteria. Panelists, please note there's no need to provide a recap of what was submitted since everyone has read it. Just provide your comments, please. After the first reader is finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. In the interest of time, we're only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. Once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their scores in the online system. It's common for scores to change as a result of this broader discussion, and please note that these scores save automatically. All right, any questions from anyone at this point? All right, let's begin. On screen is the list of applications that will be reviewed today. They're in alphabetical order. And to begin the review for operating support, panelists, please draw your attention to your resiliency assessment summary sheet. Applications with a conflict will be reviewed separately. We'll start our review when there's a consensus. Panelists, I want to draw your attention to the rows in green on your summary sheet. These are where you have consensus to recommend the applications for funding. Please take a moment to review the list in green. I'll give you a moment to do that, and let me know if you have any concerns about recommending any of these applications for funding. All right, any concerns to be raised on this first batch of applications? All right. Hearing no concerns, does the panel agree to recommend these applications for funding? And that list includes Arts United of Greater Fort Wayne, Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science, Fort Wayne Museum of Art, Indiana Repertory Theater, Indiana Symphony Society Incorporated, Indianapolis Children's Choir, Indianapolis Museum of Art Incorporated, doing business as Newfields, and the Honeywell Foundation. Does the panel agree to recommend these applications for funding? If yes, please give a thumbs up. And I'll give one more moment here to make sure I have heard from everyone.
Herb, you can just do a regular thumbs up. Oh, you got it, yay.
Yeah, either way works. Digital or your thumb, is either one is fine. Fantastic. Staff, please take note, we have consensus. Panelists recommend all of the applications for funding, the list that I just read a moment ago. All right, we are making progress. We're going to look at applications. And for this one, the majority of you said yes, you recommend for funding. But a few either didn't recommend it or said yes with modifications. And so we're moving, Paige, am I on the...
Yeah, Lisa, we're looking at the ones in orange, the Eiteljorg Museum and the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, for which Kira has a conflict, so she's been put into the waiting room. So if you want to do those two together, that's fine, since they're both consensus, yes.
Terrific. Thanks for acknowledging that so that we have full transparency about that page.
Thank you.
Exactly right. And so for these first two, the first one is the Eiteljorg Museum of American Indian and Western Art. And do we have consensus for this one as well as the Children's Museum of Indianapolis by show of digital or physical thumbs? It's unanimous. Fantastic. Staff, would you please note that we have consensus of approval for those two organizations?
And then we'll go ahead and wait for Kira to come back in, and then we can go ahead and move on to that next one, which I believe is Art for Learning.
Okay, terrific. Kira, welcome back. All right, we are moving on to the next organization, as we just mentioned, which is Arts for Learning, the Indiana affiliate of Young Audiences. And just want to open this one up for discussion and see if there are any concerns that anyone would like to share on this one.
I just had one concern, and there was in the financial statements a note that there was a bank loan forgiveness of about $95,000, which wasn't budgeted, but then was predicted for 21. And I was just wondering, I just wanted to know a little bit more about that, because that seemed, if it wasn't budgeted, a fairly large prediction for a significant impact on the financial statements of the year.
Okay, thank you, Aaron, for that. It's sounds like we have a non-budgeted item that we need some clarification on in follow-up.
Yeah, I'm sure just a single sentence or something would clear that up for me and would take me to a full yes.
Okay, terrific.
This is Herb. Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
Aaron, what I saw was a $94,000 was for, they had received 2 paycheck protection, let's call it monies. And the first one was for giving. So they're hoping, I don't know, but I'm assuming, we can check into that, and I agree with you. But the second personal paycheck protection program was not forgiven. So that's probably why they had it on as a debt.
Okay.
But we do need to research that and find out.
Yeah, and I just PPP has been showing up all over different financial statements. People are handling it differently. So if that's the case, certainly it was a little early for that second round to be showing up. A lot of the other organizations, I think, maybe applied later.
So just so I get clear, let me make sure I got this clear. So you want IAC to just get clarification on the second PPP.
We think that's what it is, and I think that's great. So thank you,
Okay.
Herb, for your help with that.
Okay, great.
Great discussion. Thank you for those comments. And as Paige just noted, we will seek clarification on the PPP. And with that additional information, does the panel recommend that this organization be funded with the required modification cited by the panel? And please indicate with a thumbs up if that is your intention. Fantastic. Staff, please note the record of the modification that we have a consensus, and panelists recommend application for funding for the Arts for Learning Indianapolis affiliate of Young Audiences. All right, so that's kind of the process we're going to follow here on subsequent organizations. The next one up is Arts Illiana Incorporated, and just welcome any conversation or comments regarding this organization. If you have any comments to make, please unmute yourself, and you're welcome to weigh in.
Hey, Herb, it sounds like you may be the financial expert of the group. I did wonder two things. The debt ratio seemed a little questionable here. And I just wanted to, if we're talking about resilience and survival, that was a little scary for me. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about their hopes to remedy some of that.
Yes, and I agree with you, Aaron, that they have such a thin margin of profit and loss of only $10,000. That's a very thin margin. But I think we should take a look into that, see if they can answer what they're going to do to resolve that, because a lot of their money on the revenue side is expected from grants, and don't know if those are reimbursement grants. They have to spend the money first and then submit receipts to get reimbursed, or what. But that is a good question and a good thought that you have. So I agree with you 100% on that one. But other than that, if we work through that, I do want to have them get some funding. It could be because of the pandemic. It could be a issue of survival for them if they don't get some funding this year.
I would completely agree with that. And then I just had a question for Paige. Did they apply for the right tier of AOS support? Because they seemed like a different size organization than some of the other ones.
Sure, yeah, great question. This particular pool of applications is both for AOS level 3, which is typically a much larger organization size, and also submitted by our regional arts partners. So Arts Illiana would be a regional arts partners.
Perfect. Thank you.
I will just chime in to note that I'm glad for the thoughtful review of the budget, and I did notice that myself, but I was pleased to see that the city had increased funding to the organization, and I was really on a resilience and looking at partners to sustain long-term. I felt like that was a wonderful sign, and certainly I'm sure very welcome from the organization. So.
Great. Excellent input here from several panelists.
I'd like to add one more thing.
Yes, Herb.
On their organizational survivor and resiliency, again, it was only 2 sentences they put down. And I would like to have a little bit more detailed answer to that question from them, because they included that they were working on short-term and long-term financial needs. but that's all they said. They're working on a plan. So what is that action plan?
Okay. So it sounds like we have two actionable items for follow-up. One, clarification or maybe some additional detail on debt ratio and margins. And then some additional detail on this question about resiliency and the specific plans being put in place and strategies in that area. So fantastic. Is everyone in agreement that with these modifications, we could move this organization, Illiana Incorporated, forward for funding? And I see, give everybody a moment here. Great, we have consensus. Paige, if you would please take note that we have consensus for application for funding for Illiana, Arts Illiana Incorporated. All right, the next organization on our list is Butler University Clowes Memorial Hall, and would open the conversation for any input on this organization and its application for funding. Any comments from the panel?
I just wanted to speak to the, it seems like the prevalence of performing arts venues on academic campuses being kind of, I don't know, subsidized and having their primary function changed during the pandemic. You know, I'm from South Bend, and I know that that's happening at our DeBartolo Performing Arts Center on the University of Notre Dame, and it looks like that's happening here too. So it seems as if the organization itself is literally changing to more of an academic classroom versus a performing arts center. And I just kind of wanted to talk about how that affects the IAC's consideration of that venue.
Thank you, Aaron, for that. Paige, it looked like maybe you were getting ready to say something there.
Yeah, I think that would be, we would need to evaluate if the organization is still within eligibility range based upon the guidelines. So that would be a separate issue from the actual sort of conversation here today. We would have to see if they're still within alignment of eligibility for the program in general, rather than resiliency, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that was my only concern, is just to see what, you know, if it's an existential change, at least for the time being, about what that organization's function is. And if it's providing art, that is one thing. But if it's basically an academic, if it's commandeered by the academic institution where it's physically located, that would kind of, in my opinion, change its viability or its availability for funding.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa, this is Herb. I have some couple questions about their income and expense statement. On the income, everything is in parentheses, and in accounting, when you have something in parentheses, that's a loss. So they have all their income in parentheses. It's a high amount. On their expense, they are not in parentheses, and again, it's a high amount, which equals the income. But again, this income expense statement, it's not a balance sheet. Also, on their balance sheet, they have a high amount of with donor restrictions and without donor restrictions. So they might want to provide information as to with donor restrictions, what those restrictions are, whether they may have the ability to spend that money in a certain line item, or whether they can't touch that money until so many months go by, or just to give more detail on those with donor restrictions. But I'm not opposed to funding, but we do need to know that.
Okay, thank you, Herb. Anyone else before I just kind of summarize what I've heard here so far? Okay, I have 3 areas of note from this conversation. One, perhaps under a different process, some follow-up perhaps in the area of ongoing eligibility for an academically affiliated organization that is not part of the criteria for this process, but just noting that. But then also some clarification perhaps and confirmation of the income and expenses provided. And then clarification on restrictions with and without donor restrictions, and some affirmation of that information. Does that pretty much summarize it?
Yes, it does for me. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. With those modifications cited, does the panel recommend that Butler University Clowes Memorial Hall be funded? And by show of thumbs,
Yeah,
it
Lisa,
looks like we've just temporarily lost connection here, so I'm just pausing for a moment. We'll take a minute to ensure that we have everyone's input. That's so important. Yeah, we're all dealing with the effects of internet and connection these days. Not a problem. Fantastic. Thank you all for your input, and staff, please take note. We have consensus. Panelists recommend application for funding on Butler University Clowes Memorial Hall. All right. The next organization on our list is Columbus Area Arts Council. And there were a couple of things that we'd like to address here if panelists would like to weigh in on that. Any modifications needed for funding or any concerns to be raised here? Yes, Aaron.
I had a quick concern about income generation. The 2020 income, I didn't see broken down in a way that I could understand. And then they had about $235,000 in additional income generation in 2021. And at this point, they had not raised, I think they raised about 1% of that. And I was just concerned to have some sort of explanation of what the strategies for achieving that kind of increase in a year that is a fairly daunting, what their strategies would be.
Okay, any additional input there for Columbus Area Arts Council? All right, it sounds like we're looking for some additional information here on income generation for this organization, plans and strategies for raising additional income that's indicated within their proposal, and strategies how they're gonna bring in that extra income. Okay. With that modification made, does the panel recommend funding for the Columbus Area Arts Council? By show of thumbs up, please. Fantastic, we have a consensus. And Paige, if you would please note that the panelists recommend application for funding for Columbus Area Arts Council. All right, we are moving right along here to the International Violin Competition of Indianapolis. And same process, we'll just open the floor for any conversation, or concerns to be raised by any of the panelists? Okay, Aaron?
It's so hard for organizations that have, competitions or something that either aren't happening every year, and that the planning for said competitions is so uncertain. I just felt like with all of that uncertainty, I just wanted to hear more about how new audiences are being sought after, and how kind of new partnerships. I know one of the things that we were to look at is, are you increasing collaborations, workload, all those kind of things. And I didn't see a lot of specific examples of that. I did love the fact that they were talking about social justice, diversity, and education. But I know that they're looking at that now, and there hasn't been a lot of effort yet, but I'm anxious to see what they are doing. So I don't know how to say, it's just so hard for an organization like this, where their primary function is a one-off. And when you don't know when that's going to happen, what is the momentum behind the organization? And so I don't know how that can be addressed. I think they should be funded, but I just think that even with that uncertainty, there's a lot of work that can be done in the community to create kind of that engagement, even in times of uncertainty. So I think I just like to hear, what are some of the strategies that even with an uncertain quadrennial, what are those partnerships that are keeping the momentum building, that are keeping the organization relevant, even in this very strange and very uncertain environment.
This is
Thank
Herb.
you,
I'd like
Aaron.
to add a couple other comments. This is the first time I have come across an organization that their strategic plan is quadrennial, every 4 years. That's a long time. But I looked at this can't compare them to other organizations, but this is unique. And so their organizational survival, even though they only meet every 4 years for the strategic plan, their financial statement is very strong. They have an enormous amount of cash on hand. And the expense for this competition is probably 10-15% of their cash on hand. So I had to look at this differently, but I just wanted to put those down as my comments. With as much cash as they have, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't fund them. We should fund them, but what amount, that's up to IAC to make that decision. But yes, we should fund them, but not as much, not a very high percentage, is my comment.
Thank you for those comments and concerns raised. Any additional, Kira?
Yeah, I would just like to point out that I understand the points that have been made, but just by way of evidence, I mean, they did share that they had increased their collaborations. It would have been nice to have a little more information about that, but I do take that as at face value. And as I think about this year, this is a unique time, and with a quadrennial competition and an organization that has a particularly active phase every 4 years, I was particularly impressed that they had done all of the different things that they listed on their organizational survival plan. This is an organization that appears to be very active in thinking about how to ensure that it continues and can do its important work, preserving this critical art form and access to this critical art form. So I would just say, especially in light of the circumstances that we're in with performing arts and with this unique type of organization, I would encourage full funding of this organization. And I think they have presented a good plan. And I also note that in their strategies for engaging the community, they did mention that they had created a hybrid concert model, and it seems like they've done most things that they were able to do to present violin music to the community. So just wanted to share those observations.
Appreciate the conversation. Any additional comments? All right, so it sounds like it would be helpful in follow-up for this organization, if possible, to provide any additional details that might be available on how the organization is attracting new audiences and partnerships moving forward. And so if those modifications were to be made and a little bit more detail added, does the panel recommend funding for the application of the International Violin Competition of Indianapolis? By show of thumbs up with your vote, please. Fantastic. Paige, please take note. We have consensus. The panelists recommend application for funding for International Violin Competition of Indianapolis. Next organization is Music for All Incorporated. And following this same kind of structure, looks like there may be perhaps a bit of conversation around this. I welcome any concerns or comments at this time. And just a reminder to unmute yourself if you'd like to comment.
Hey, Herb, another question for you on the financial side. I mentioned that I was concerned with the reliance on cash to bridge the gap here. You know, it seemed like they really, they had cash on hand and used it instead of finding other solutions. Because if they do that more than once or twice, they're done. And that's troubling. And wondered if you had any concerns about that. If you didn't, then I don't either.
Yeah, let me take a look at that line item, if I can find it here. Oh, here we go. Salaries, direct personnel expenses. It's been pretty even, but and then with contract labor and then the employee benefits, payroll taxes, it's been pretty much the same amount, except for when they did 2021, they did include a budget, which is probably, I'd say maybe a 20% reduction from salary and personnel expenses for the prior 2 years of 20. But who knows what's going to happen in 2021. Yeah. So I guess that was not a concern, but just a minor inquiry. I'm sure they will most likely reduce that if they don't have the money and put more people on part-time.
Yeah, I was looking at the final page of the financial documents where it says cash and equivalents, that current assets, where actual and projected are about $3 million different, I guess 2.8. Does that trouble you at all?
Well, I'm trying to find where the income is coming in from to help them on that.
Right.
The total receipts that they budgeted was very high. On the first page of their receipts, is that the first page or the middle?
Well,
page?
yeah, I see that the ticket sales line. You know, their budget was 4 million and their projection is 6,000.
Is this? Wait, are we looking at the right one? Is this Music for All?
Yeah. It's the first line of the first page of their financial and the first line of the third page of their financial. Because that's kind of, it looks like that's where their compensating?
Well, I don't want to say the number, but what the first page I'm looking at here is from February 29th, 2020 to February 20th, 2021, the total receipts that they have budgeted is 4 times higher than their projection.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Um,
I don't want to say the numbers.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, so if they're budgeting 4 times what their projection is, again, if they get that, then they should have enough money to pay for the direct personnel expenses. But they, these are line items. They can move them around. They
Right.
can move from one line item to another line item, and whoever approves that would most likely be their board, because the director would have to, executive director would have to say, look, this line item, we're not spending that much money as we expected to, for example, in advertising. Can we
Right.
switch that over to personnel expenses or workshop contest? Let's move that over. They could be doing that. But again, that budget to me is, I'd say, overreaching.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We may want to have them explain that because they've got total. Yeah, excuse me.
Oh, sorry. So I just want to make sure that I'm capturing the idea here and that it's aligned with the criteria for this particular process. It sounds like perhaps some further inquiry into specific line items, including cash on hand, might be recommended to move this funding proposal forward.
Yeah. I just said more detail on how the organization is addressing financial situation. So if as the qualifier for the with modifications.
Okay.
Yeah, and let me add one more thing. I will give you this because the first item I see on receipts, which is for income statement of activities for ticket sales, they have a projection of $6,000, but the budget that they put down it's not even close to that. It's way high, and it's over the top.
That was my big concern,
Yeah.
and it looked like they were using cash reserves to bridge that, and that seemed like a very interesting way to use assets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's over the top. So we may want them to think about and resubmit their budget for 2021, the projection, and then the budget. Because there's just too much of discrepancy.
Okay.
Thanks, Herb.
If it was a couple $100,000, I wouldn't be, but it is much more than that.
Okay, so fantastic. Thank you for those additional details. It sounds like the recommendation is that this particular organization resubmit or clarify projection and budget, and to make sure that we're in good shape there. Any other conversation on this or other topics related to Music for All Incorporated? All right, with this additional information and kind of a closer look at the budget and projections, does the panel recommend application for funding for Music for All Incorporated? By show of thumbs up, please. Thank you. We have a consensus page. Please take note. The panelists recommend application for funding for Music for All with the additional detail requested there, as we've discussed. All right. Next organization is Northwest Indiana Symphony Society Incorporated. And I would open the conversation for any comments or concerns for this organization.
They had indicated a loss of earned income, but I didn't see evidence of them having a clear plan particularly considering that this year's season was scaled back significantly, almost the entire season canceled. So I was interested to learn a little bit more about the lost earned income and how they were going to balance that.
Thank you, Renee. So it sounds like the panelists would recommend more information about a specific plan to cover loss of earned income. Any other comments or concerns?
I would just say with any performing arts organization, trying to find new collaborators during this time is incredibly important, just for community relevance. So I did see that they noted that their collaborations had decreased. And I understand that when you have union contracts that maybe you're not allowed to play, it is very hard sometimes to find new collaborators. So I understand that there's, especially symphonic groups, it's incredibly hard right now. So I would just say that in this hiatus, you know, your staff and your organizing individuals, board, whoever, you know, finding new partners that when we do start to be able to do what we do, that those partnerships are ready to go. And I would just encourage the organization to continue to try to find those community partners, especially with underrepresented communities or underserved communities, because that's the future of our organizations. And I'm happy to, with the modifications that Renee was talking about, approve them for funding.
This is Herb, Lisa.
Yes.
I did notice, and it impressed me that I highlighted a lot of things, but they received a generous bequest of a sizable amount. I'm not going to give that number, from the estate of a longtime donor. So that tells me they have a relationship with all their donors. To get a bequest of that amount really saved them and helped them out and give them a real bump. So just as a additional comment is that they may want to focus on having their big donors have them either a lunch or a dinner or something, and have them consider not to work up right away, don't ask for the money right away, but eventually build up to it, that where they might say, hey, have you ever thought about including our organization in your will or in your estate planning? And obviously, when they receive this from a longtime donor, there's got to be other people in that org who are their donors who would be happy to do that for them.
It looks like they have that challenge grant campaign as well.
Yes.
For their large donors. So I think they are doing the work of sustainability. I just think I'll always fight for community engagement.
Great conversation, everyone. Any additional comments on Northwest Indiana Symphony Society Incorporated? A few acknowledgements and commendations there that are helpful as well. And I didn't hear any further asks beyond the plan for loss of earned income. It sounds to me like the other modifications are not, there wasn't anything else specific.
No.
Am I overlooking anything there before I move on? I just heard a lot of good input for this organization, so thank you for that. Okay, so with that modification requested for a plan for loss of earned income for this organization, by show of thumbs up, does the panel recommend funding for Northwest Indiana Symphony Society Incorporated? Thank you very much. We have consensus. Staff, please take note. The panelists recommend funding for this organization. Next up is South Shore Arts. And same process, working our way through here. Any commentary, conversation, any concerns to be raised regarding this organization's submission?
I hate to beat the cash horse again, but I saw that they had a bequest as well, and that's fantastic. And I think that may be in short-term investments right now. But it seems like their development income forecast was very optimistic and seemed to reflect anticipating potentially another unbudgeted gift. If that's the case, fantastic. And congratulations. If that's not the case, then it seemed very, very optimistic to reach those kind of development income results without said large unbudgeted gift. So I just wanted a little more information on the fact of financial planning and income generation.
Thank you, Erin. Any other comments or concerns? All right. To summarize, what I think I heard there was a request for some additional rationale or detail on development income and the forecast for that, and what the organization is thinking in that regard. And with those modifications in place, by show of thumbs up, would the panel recommend funding for South Shore Arts? Great. We have consensus, and Paige, if you would please take note that we have consensus to fund South Shore Arts. Next organization is the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. And here again, I'll open the floor for any comments, input, concerns. All right. All right, if there aren't any concerns or conversation around this one, does the panel agree to recommend the application for funding for the Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana? If yes, please give a thumbs up. Thank you all. And Paige, if you'll please note that the panelists recommend application for funding for Arts Council of Southwestern Indiana. And the final organization that we will take into consideration here for operational funding is Tippecanoe Arts Federation, sorry. And so panelists, any comments, conversation, any input on operational funding for this organization?
I was concerned that they had projected their contributions to decrease and programming income to increase. It seems like that's almost the reverse of what most organizations are experiencing right now. And I do think they should work to capitalize donors' willingness to rise to the need right now. And there's definitely opportunity for that. So I just wanted to hear maybe the rationale of that dual decision of, it seemed like, counterintuitive projections.
Okay, thank you, Erin. Any conversation or additional comments?
Yes, Lisa, this is Herb. on their profit and loss sheet, they have projected only one fundraiser, and they have budgeted a certain amount, and they projected a lower amount. But this past year, during the pandemic, the actual amount that they received was 25% of what they budgeted to receive in income. So they're taking that in 21 and assuming that the pandemic is not going to affect their large annual fundraiser. So I don't know. I just want you to be aware of that. I don't know whether the pandemic and social distancing will be minimal when they have their fundraising event, but that is a concern. I would hate to have them plan and then realize that they don't have enough money to pay all the expenses for that event, because the expenses for that event is 50,000 less than the money they project to raise. So that's a concern. Also, other income, they did not budget for 21 and the projected for their fiscal year 2021 a regional block grant. So maybe they've reached the maximum on that block grant, because sometimes you can do those block grants for 1 or 2 years, not more than that. So they must have run out of, not by their own choice, but there's money there that they can't expect to receive during the fiscal year of 2021.
Okay, thank you. And apologies for the background noise of my animal during those comments, everybody. We are definitely in the midst of the pandemic, and I heard comments to that effect as it affects this organization in terms of perhaps wanting a little bit of additional information on fundraising plans and the potential of ongoing impact moving into the next year. Would that be a good summarization?
Yes.
Okay, great. We all continue to be affected by the pandemic in various ways. Thank you for the very robust conversation on this organization as well. And so with the modification that I've articulated there, panelists, would you recommend that we move this organization forward for their application for operational funding by show of thumbs up? Great. Thank you so much. And Paige, please take note, we have consensus and the panelists recommend application for funding for Tippecanoe Arts Federation. All right, congratulations, everybody. You have made it through the first part of our review process. Thank you again for just really engaging conversation and for your thoughtfulness and your comments. I guess I'll take a pulse here. It's about 2:30 to see what the sentiment is on taking a break. Panelists, if you're interested in taking a break, would you please give me a thumbs up, or are you of the mindset to just keep on rolling? Okay, well, you know what? We're gonna keep on rolling, everybody. Dogs and pandemic and all, we're just gonna keep going. Let's move on. This is kind of a fun part of the conversation because we're going to move on to merit award consideration. And as a reminder, this is a different part of the process. In this process, unlike the last one that we just completed, Panelists will provide their assessment of the application's merit and submission and update their scores based on the discussion. So panelists, please refer to the merit award consideration list. And we'll sort of follow the same type of approach in that we're going to just go through organization by organization here. And we will start with the first organization, and I'm going to tap in here to my reader for each of the organizations. Renee, you were the reader for the Arts for Learning Indiana affiliate of Young Audiences. Would you give us a summary there on this organization, please?
Certainly. I enjoyed reading through their application, and particularly a couple of things that I wanted to highlight, that they had created a needs assessment survey, and they had what I considered a significant number of 90 different educators responded. I'm not sure what the total distribution was, but I thought that that was a good baseline for them. The creativity that this organization showcased in terms of creating these art kits, and which they had them distributed at a variety of geographical locations for students to pick those up. And more importantly, the signs of solidarity, particularly recognizing that we are in the COVID environment, and they were very intentional with those signs of solidarity, and that they wanted to connect and inspire the community during isolation. And I just think about driving through the West Lafayette community, although this particular organization is not based in Lafayette, but we too had some signs up, and just the positive energy that those signs created, and knowing that it was intentional for them to be inspiring for the community is to be applauded. I was particularly interested in the Artists Take 5 feedback, Facebook Live activities, and that they recognized that, you know, everybody is zoomed out, and they were very concise in terms of the presentation of those Facebook Live programs, and that they were successfully, really, I thought, pivoted in a very positive way, and provided some necessary resources for both educators and students. And this notion of building this catalog for schools to access, I thought, was incredibly important, and that the catalog also represented a variety of arts disciplines in dance, music, and literature. So they weren't solely focused on one particular art form. So overall, I was very excited about what they did. I think that they provided some necessary resources for educators, and also were inspiring for the community.
Thank you so much, Renee. Any additional or opposing comments from the rest of the panel?
I really liked the ABC fellowships in getting, I don't know, a direct community engagement through actual community artists. I thought that was really genius, and that authenticity that I think is incredibly important when trying to create those kind of relationships. And you know, they didn't talk about if that reaches underserved populations. I would assume it does, but I would like to hear a little bit more, just because I'm interested, because it sounds like a really cool program, and I'd honestly like to steal it and do something kind of similar to that in South Bend. So yeah, just hurrah. I really thought that was a great program.
This is Herb.
Yes, Herb.
On the underserved communities, I read that, and I was hoping that we would do something like that here in Fort Wayne, Allen County, where I live. But they focused on the underserved neighborhoods, such as Fountain Square, Riverside, Center Township, Northeast, and Holiday Park. And each neighborhood had an assigned artist who would build relationships through arts experience with the people in those neighborhoods. So I thought that was a very good way of serving the underserved. And that's all I have to say about this application.
Thank you all. Appreciate your thoughtful review, Renee, and these additional comments. And just a reminder to our panelists to please finalize your score and update your online comments, and to save them. All right. The next organization for our consideration is the Eiteljorg Museum of American Indians and Western Art. And I'll call on you, Erin, please, for a report as our reader on this organization.
Can I just chime in? Because of my conflict, am I supposed to be out of the room for this part as well?
Thank you, Kira, for that call out. And we'll just pause for a moment while we admit Kira to a digital waiting room. All right, appreciate that. And we'll resume our conversation. Any comments, or sorry, Erin, your report out on this organization?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that I will be following the IDEA efforts of this organization. There's some impressive work going on. I loved how the programming was developed with the underserved communities instead of for, because I think that is essential when doing that. And I think some of the things I was just really impressed with, so I kind of just wanted to read some of the things that they had written just as a public statement of how to do this right. I really was impressed, so I'm going to read a couple paragraphs, forgive me, but I just think we can all learn a lot from what they're doing. A diversity task force is updating a 15-year-old diversity statement, expanding it to be renewed in a commitment to diversity, equity, accessibility, inclusivity with an action plan to identify and address systemic barriers to fulfilling this commitment. I think those kind of action plans, this is me parenthetically, action plans are essential. And then upon the George Floyd murder, Eiteljorg staff and board worked on a statement of support of Black Lives Matter and a commitment to eliminating racism. In 2021, facilitated training for staff, board, and implicit bias in addressing systemic racism. We're looking to do that, and I think that's essential in this era. Cross-departmentally, work had begun on a 1-year, 5-year, and 10-year goals in the diversity plan. Those goals address institutional position, internal training, and external outreach, such as work with students from the Indiana School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Just prior to closure, this collaboration was being highlighted through their work on the special exhibit, Please Touch, the sculptures of Michael Naranjo, based on workshops with the artist. I love that they're looking at diversity and inclusion as not just either racial or socioeconomic, but also in ability. That's something that a lot of organizations, especially in the arts, sometimes forget. So I was really impressed that they're working on that. I thought that it was good that they said every department has representation on that diversity or that IDEA task force, working with dementia, Alzheimer's, which is a rampant thing, which will definitely be an access and ability issue. Of course, they're working with Native American galleries and, working with that population. I thought, talking about their sensory certified standards. I had not heard that particular term, but I thought that was a really interesting term that I'd like to learn more about. Again, they had some real commitment to an on-site program around Juneteenth, working with professors Tammy Cooper and James Anyika, and working with the church as well, which I thought was important because faith communities are incredibly important, especially in my experience with the African American community. Looks like they just are really dedicated to this work, and it just seemed like it was bold, it was ambitious. And to be doing that kind of thing, especially in these kind of circumstances, needs to be applauded. And I think we can all learn from the real, how do I say this? Taking guidance from communities and then plugging that into the organization instead of trying to create programming without that input. So just all in all, I just said gold star.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Renee, Herb, any comments?
This is Herb. Lisa, thank you. Yeah, I agree with what Aaron said. The way they the way they served the underserved community was very amazing. They hit all the checklists, but I do want to give them credit with regards to their extra commitment in delivering arts experience to their community. And this tells me, it's not there, but they said when the COVID closure began March 2020, this organization immediately shifted, which tells me they had pre-planning. They had expected a closure, and what were they going to do? And so with the board and the director and the staff working together as a team, before the closure was announced, they immediately shifted. They were ready. They immediately shifted to virtual and digital engagement, such as online resources, weekly activity videos, weekly newsletters, digital curriculum, curated tours of special exhibitions, and exhibits of artists in residence. So they were ready. So I just have to compliment them that they had done their planning in advance of the closure happening from COVID.
Thank you, Herb. Useful input for all of these organizations from our panelists. All right, just a reminder to our panelists to finalize your score and update your online comments. And we will move on then to the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science. And okay, and we're welcoming Kira back from her digital waiting room. And Herb is our reader for the Evansville Museum of Arts, History, and Science. Herb, if you would please provide your comments.
Yes, on the arts experience, I gave them high marks for that. They worked to strengthen their online presence by creating virtual exhibits. They offered videos on various subjects to highlight their performance collection. And the most successful virtual campaign was the Object of the Day, where this was posted daily on all their social media platforms that also included photographs and collection items. The relationships they had, they collaborated with 4 other arts organizations in their community to cross-promote virtual and physical exhibitions on their website and social media. And this initiative was called Accessing Arts Anywhere. And this went to the schools in a 17-county area. And if you know how many counties there are in Indiana, there's 92, but they are hitting 17 counties. That's impressive. And again, they developed meaningful relationships with those 4 other organizations. So the collaboration is reflective of those meaningful relationships. And then the underserved communities, they provided several activities at no charge at all. That's rare when you can go somewhere and get something free. And some of the activities were Object of the Day, Accessing Arts Anywhere, and then the performance of the Evansville Harmonic in their art museums. So I gave them high marks.
Thank you, Herb, for that report. Any comments from the other panelists? Okay. And again, a reminder just to update your scores online. Next organization is the Fort Wayne Museum of Art. And Kira, you're our reader on this organization. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as I was reviewing this submission, one of the things that we're looking for, of course, is that they're delivering arts experiences in new ways in response to the input of the community. And I think that is such an important piece of what we've been talking about today, is the partnerships that these arts organizations have with community. And as I look at the evidence shared, the Museum of Art provides several indications that they are working very deeply with their community as they were adapting to the COVID world. So there was a lot of engagement with teachers, which I thought was fantastic. And in listening to the teachers, it was clear that pre-recorded and on-demand programming was most helpful. And so they were able to pivot and provide that kind of support to teachers. They also consulted regularly with other folks from the Fort Wayne Community Schools, including a board member who serves on Fort Wayne Community Schools faculty. The one thing that would have been helpful here is I would have loved to hear more about the impact of those partnerships. They didn't share very much about, before COVID, the outreach was about 35 to 40,000 students each year, and it's unclear whether they were able to expand or maintain that impact with students with the virtual programming. But again, what we were asking them for is how they exhibited extraordinary commitment in working with the community to pivot. The other wonderful examples of working with the community were the ways that they were able to adapt the Day of the Dead programming, which I thought was, again, a great indication of how this organization works closely with the community, providing some resources for free, certainly not to the scale that they had done before, but again, with more digital and engaging opportunities. And then finally, they did mention work where they collaborated with a Fort Wayne group for communities of color on a photography exhibition. So again, back to the criteria we were looking at, I was really thrilled with what they were able to do despite the pandemic. And it appears that through this, again, one of the other things we were looking for is whether they were building meaningful relationships with residents and community partners. And I believe that's so. But again, my only minor quibble would be, it would have been really great to hear a little bit more about the impact and outcome of those collaborations, because they seemed so robust and so thoughtful. I was just hoping to get a little flavor of how that actually landed. But again, a terrific submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. Any comments and follow-up from our other panelists? Okay. All right, reminder to finalize your scores for this organization. And we're moving on to the Indiana Repertory Theater. Renee, would you please share your comments as the reader for this organization?
Certainly. I thought that the Indiana Repertory Theater did a marvelous job reimagining every aspect of the theatrical production. It was just incredible to read through their application. They successfully pivoted their plays in which they brought in a team and filmed them during the COVID restrictions, were sensitive to making sure that their cast for the shows that they were doing was reduced so that they will be compliant with the guidelines relative to COVID. And they also were very sensitive about the importance of producing shows that were uplifting themes and included people of color in those themes. I'm looking at my notes, I'm sorry. Oh,
no problem.
I thought stood out for me was this notion of how that they were very also conscientious of making sure that they secured the streaming rights, because I think sometimes as we transition into the COVID environment, a lot of people just take material and put it out there, and they did not do that. They were very sensitive to the importance of making sure that they have the correct permissions in order to do that. And I wanted to acknowledge and compliment them on that. And their inclusion series, the I Inclusion series, I thought was very creative. And again, that they were serving populations that previously had not been accessed through the IRT. So overall, I thought they did a wonderful job. And I also wanted to just give them 2 thumbs up for the copyright permission sensitivity that they've had.
Thank you so much, Renee. Any other comments from the other panelists? All right, thank you for that overview, Renee. And next up for us here is the Indiana Symphony Society. Erin, could you give us a report out from your reading, please?
Sure. I think the first thing I was impressed with was the fact that they surveyed their members and donors. I think engaging with in this moment is incredibly important because there is a lot of differences of opinion, a lot of differences in comfort for engaging with the arts at this time. And I think that allowed them to realize that they did need to transition into hybrid, virtual, outdoor, all the things that aren't normal programming for organizations like this. I was impressed with something called the Ashkenazi series, which was a partnership with a local hospital and had a large corporate sponsor, which again helps to subsidize the programming. Recording videos for that are streamed through hospital televisions. So in a time where a lot of people are sick and a lot of people are hurting, providing the arts to fulfill that, I think that mission of the arts, which is to calm and uplift, is a beautiful way for that program to, I'm sure, succeed. I love that they are considering to continue that program as well, even in the future, which I think is lovely. And I just, as an aside, I think it's really nice that it seems like some of the programming that organizations have discovered is continuing even past this. And I think that's something we've all learned. And that I love that our art form is broadening through this challenge. They also had something called the Discovery Concert Series, and highlighting the social, emotional, and mental benefits of music. And I liked how they distinguished those three different ways that music can improve people's lives. And so again, for screen fatigue, limiting those to 15 minutes, I think is an incredibly good move. And it looks like they're going to reach, the projections are like 17,000 children, which again is a wonderful way to adapt really creatively and successfully in this interesting situation we're all in. And then finally, they are continuing with their MYO, the Metropolitan Youth Orchestra. It seemed like that was one of the places that did have quite a lot of success. And I think a lot of that is because they're not hindered or obstructed by union contracts, that they can work with children even outside of the players maybe not being as involved. One of the, I thought, really resilient things is they had contracts with some professional artists, and they were able to repurpose those contracts to serve the youth orchestra in more educational and virtual ways. Instead of coming and performing a concert, now they're getting some really lovely services from world-class artists for the youth that are participating in their programming, which I thought all of that was really lovely. I did hope that they can be building again relationships with new communities. I think that there's a lot of existing partnerships that were either built or expanded, but I didn't hear a lot about new partnerships. And I'd like to hear again about ways that they can kind of expand into underrepresented or underserved communities with the work of the symphony. So again, impressive work, a lot of stuff, and I think they definitely deserve to be considered for merit award.
I saw a lot of head nodding and affirmation as you were talking there, Erin. Any comments from the other panelists? All right, thank you so much, Erin. That really highlighted some of the great things being done there. And so panelists, please update your scores for that organization. And we'll move on then to the Indianapolis Children's Choir. And Herb, could you give us a report out from the reading you did on this organization, please?
Yes, I will, Lisa. With the arts experience, this organization practices the artistic pillars of history, community, education, and excellence to serving their singers, families, and the community by providing high-quality opportunities for musical artistry, creativity, and self-expression in a safe environment. With regarding to meaningful relationship, yes, they did. During the pandemic, this organization was very concerned about the children's health and safety, and they consulted with state and local health officials They requested input and feedback from the families of the children and other constituents as well. Regarding the art experience that were developed from the meaningful relationships, this organization had a hybrid model for music education and concert performances, and has ensured that this organization continues to achieve artistic excellence from the children involved in their choir. And the extent that they served underserved communities, this organization extends its impact in the community by striving to remove barriers to participation in its program through several initiatives, such as financial assistance directly to help families by reducing tuition costs based on need so that their economic situation is not a barrier to their participation. They offer early childhood and any after-school music education programs to schools, churches, and community agencies, many of which serve at-risk and low-income children. And I gave them high marks.
Thank you so much, Herb. Comments from any of the other panelists on the Indianapolis Children's Choir? All right. Moving right along here, and just a reminder to the panelists to keep updating things online with your comments. Let's take a look at Music for All Incorporated. Renee, what did you find out there?
Yeah, I thought that the organization did a wonderful job introducing some live virtual showcases for the community. The online resources expansion that they had was incredible. Including the free webinars. I thought that they did a really good job articulating how that the webinars increased their new audiences, but I was wanting some additional information as to who those new audiences are. I also felt that they did not fully address how they were serving underserved communities, and I would like to have had a little bit more information on response to that particular question. But overall, I thought that they did a great job transitioning their programs to the online format. The webinars seemed to be very well attended and appreciated, but I would like some more additional information on both the new audiences that they attracted, who were they, and whether or not they were meeting the needs of some of the underserved communities.
Great. Thank you, Renee, and thanks for bringing up those two things that would be helpful for that organization. Aaron, Herb, Kira, any additional comments?
Oh, this is Herb. All I wanted to add, I agree with what Renee said, but in regards to the underserved, but they really worked hard to build meaningful relationships. They collaborated with Dr. Scott Edger, Indianapolis Symphony, industry leaders, parents, teachers, music professors, so they could provide quality music instructions to students, teachers, parents, and the community. So they did a really good job on that.
Thank you, Herb. All right. Let's move on then. We're to the second to last organization that we're going to take a look at here today. And Herb, this one, you read some about the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. Could you please give us a report out? It's
just like the Eiteljorg Museum. This is Gold Star. It's a good model for the other organizations. I gave them high marks and everything. The arts experience, they launched a new initiative, Museum at Home, where they provided virtual arts programs to children and families that reach more than 12 million people. They offered virtual school field trips in response to teacher demand, where this program reached over 6,000 students. Also, they hosted 2 new Indiana visiting artists, Israel Solomon, a painter, and David Solomon, a children's author and illustrator, with more than 3,000 children and families participating in on-site and virtual art workshops in 2020. Regards to their meaningful relationships, they built this organization. In addition to the regular communications to their community, they employed new community strategies such as likelihood to visit surveys to the public. Donors and members could extend their membership for a month's loss due to forced closure. This is a good idea. If you paid for the whole year, but you didn't get to use it, instead of you reimburse or refunding the money, they extended their membership period, which is a great idea. They also added new programs such as Museum at Home, virtual school field trips, Indiana visiting artists. I'm repeating myself, but I wanted to bring that up again to emphasize the meaningful relationship that they continue to build on. The arts experience reflect their relationships. The organization's basic strategy for engaging the community involved reimagined its mission delivery to continue serving audiences with arts program during the pandemic. They increased their communications with their donors, members, and their community. And then the way the underserved, I'm not going to read 2 pages of my notes here, but I was very impressed the way they served the underserved communities. This was a leader for a statewide Access Pass program, which provided $2 admission at 12 Indiana museums for families who qualify for state financial assistance. In 2020, the museum worked with the Indiana Family and Social Service Administration and school districts to raise awareness among low-income families. In 2020, there were over 4,500 Access Pass families that generated approximately over 21,000 visits to the participating institutions. They also included foster families. They provided memberships for foster families to ensure that their foster children I'm sorry. I participated in the foster family program for a while, so it's touching. But anyway, they ensured that the foster children would have access to the museum, arts, and cultural services. And then with communities initiatives, they focused on a diverse area of predominantly low-income residents. This planning process identified the educational opportunities as a key component for the museum, and it provided neighborhood education and arts initiatives, after-school programs, apprenticeship programs, career guidance programs for scholarship, and a scholarship program for those students that they felt had a skill in art. And then they also included the neighborhood club. The museum provided free family memberships to all those Mid-North households, which were classified as poverty homes, to ensure that income is not a barrier to accessing the museum's art exhibits and programs.
Thank you so much, Herb, for that summary of all of the actions taken there by the Children's Museum of Indianapolis. Any additional input, Aaron or Renee?
I just wanted to second they're doing everything right. And then I love the Mid-North, just the idea of being a good neighbor. I love that. We all are physically located in a place, and to be generous to your actual neighbors, I think is a really lovely gesture.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that input. And we're coming up now in our last organization for review.
Lisa, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to note that Kira had a conflict with Children's Museum and is returning for our final application.
Thank you for that, Paige, and welcome back, Kira, for the final organization that we'll review this afternoon. Aaron's going to give us a report out as the reader for the Honeywell Foundation. Aaron?
Thank you so much. Two of the things I thought were really great about Honeywell was that they have a really unique opportunity in that they had 2 venues or sites that allowed them to do some really spectacular work in this moment. One of them was a drive-in theater, which I think a lot of us have heard about drive-in theaters kind of being this pandemic-proof kind of venue because everybody can stay in their cars, and they did utilize that for, it looks like, a lot of content. And then also they had something called the Eagles Theater that had a production studio in it. And that production studio allowed them to do an incredible amount of really interesting and much needed arts content They produced a series of 12 videos that incorporated music and storytelling, coupled with response and extension work that were pushed out virtually. And then a lot of teachers incorporated those videos into their e-learning lesson plans. And that came from some surveys they did to see what were needed. And one of the percentages, I always like seeing actual statistics, but they said 87.5% of teachers responded that they would use those virtual arts education lessons in their own lesson plans, which I think a lot of the time we create content and don't know if it's actually going to be used, but it looks like that they did a great job because teachers liked it and used it and will continue to use it, because I thought that was really good. Again, using that input from teachers, they developed what they're calling arts integrated modules with Indiana artists. And it's just, I mean, they go on and on and on about the power of these modules, and it looks like they will just be really well received by, you know, all of the teachers that are doing that, even after the pandemic's over. So, you know, it looks like they transitioned really quickly into virtual content and becoming a virtual content creator. And doing all this on a collaborative basis, I thought was very successful. And then finally, you know, talking about the underserved community, a lot of theirs in kind of socioeconomic need, the counties that they represent over 15 Indiana counties. And they showing that, you know, this virtual content kind of takes down barriers and allows the arts to exist in classrooms where maybe it wouldn't otherwise exist. So I thought that was really impressive. And again, I thought they did a great job.
Thank you, Aaron. Kira, Renee, Herb, anything to add there?
Nope. Aaron said exactly what I wrote down.
Thanks for sharing your notes, Herb.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Well, this concludes the FY 22 Arts Organization Support Advisory Review Panel for AOS 3 and Regional Arts Partner applications. Applicants will be notified of the status of their grant following the June Commission meeting. And if you have any questions, please contact Paige Sharp, who you've met here today, who manages those programs. And thank you to everyone for being here today.